To stay open through the impulse to close, to stay loving through the urge to clench, to stay vulnerable through the desire to hide, is the biggest act of freedom, the grandest use of our will, to sharpen the point to our pencil which writes the story of our lives with softness so palpable that the words are sharp, that the words are poignant, is to commit to our creation. It is important and it is imperative that you learn how to be more of yourself, always.
But you're awakening already, right? It's already happening. That's why you're here and why you're listening.
Nothing is broken in your world. Nothing needs to be changed. Nothing needs to be different. And yet everything is constantly changing because it is the inevitable nature of that which is eternal.
What I've come to realize in this endless searching for answers is that there really are none.
If you spend your whole life trying to get your act together, then what do you have? You have an act, right? Instead of a life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Figuring Shit Out. My name is Vanessa Fontana. I'm your host, and if you're new here, Figuring Shit Out is a space for brave, intentional living in a world of flux. It is meant to help you embrace courageously what you have figured out, create conversation around what we haven't, and to softly surrender to what may never be figured out. And on this season of Figuring Shit Out, season 4, we're embracing the powerful transformations that come when we commit to something larger than what we fear, when we allow ourselves to move from a place of survival into creation, and when we claim the right to our lives, we claim the right to our dreams, our purpose, and our power. So welcome to episode 103. I am so excited to have you. This episode is really important to the season, to figuring shit out. It's going to be a 2-part series. I can't believe I've never really talked about this before. And this episode in particular is all about how to stay in alignment, how to stay in love, how to relentlessly continue loving, continue being, have an open heart, even when, even though, even if, all of the evens. That is what this episode is about. Uncircumstantially, unconditionally being who you are meant to be no matter what. Not shrinking yourself around others. Not letting negative people influence you. Not letting environments seep into your pores and your skin and deplete and deflate you. How do we do this? This seems like something that we struggle with so much as humans in this life. I cannot count how many times I've had questions from other people and questions of my own around, Vanessa, I feel really aligned when I'm by myself, or I go on a trip and I feel really aligned, or I go on a retreat and I feel really aligned, or I had a really aligned 2 weeks, or things started going really well in my life and then I had to go and hang out with my parents, or I had to go and do something I didn't want to do, or I was around negative people, or I was in this circumstance that I didn't want to be in, or my home life is really negative and I don't know exactly how to stay in my positive center because my home life is negative. Some iteration of, I know alignment, but I'm having trouble staying in alignment. How do I stay in alignment? That is the question. And this is something that I have come into direct contact with in the last month and a half of my life. And this is something that is so important for us to learn, because if you feel like you can only be yourself by yourself, what good is that? It's wonderful. It's great to develop a beautiful relationship with oneself to the point where you love spending time alone and you feel really connected to yourself. But if you can't share that with other people, if you can only share that with a select group of people who only perform the way that you want them to perform, who only behave the way that you think is the right way to behave, then what is the use? That state of being, that loving openness, is needed in this world all of the time. It is important and it is imperative that you learn how to be more of yourself, always. This episode is going to focus primarily on staying in a place of alignment, even when your conditions aren't what you find to be aligned. And particularly, this episode is going to focus on around people who do not see the world the way that you might see the world, and interacting with them, continuing to have relationships with people, but still staying in your center, in your place of alignment, in your unapology. This isn't just like friends and family who might not see the world the way that you do. This is in every circumstance of life, because when you believe in something, when you commit to something larger than what you fear, when you are out here creating your dream life, there's going to be pushback from people who aren't creating their dream life, who do not know that they have the power, who are not tapped into their own conscious effort at creation. And so because of that, it is so important that we learn not only how to become aligned and how to be aligned and how to identify our desires and our creations and our purpose, but then to be able to stay in that place, then to be able to hold that place, to hold joy, to hold love, no matter what. And so that's what this episode is going to be focused on. The second part of this episode is going to be focused more on what happens when you stay aligned and what happens when you relentlessly continue loving, when you relentlessly continue committing to yourself, and how community in your life forms, how you actually meet your people, how you actually meet the people in your life who are going to contribute so beautifully to this alignment, to this purpose, to this unraveling of this alignment in your life, and what happens when you stay where you are. And it's going to cover a lot more around the growing and outgrowing of friendships as we get older. It's something that in our 20s, I know so many of us are experiencing, and something that so many of us crave is community. But first and foremost, let's talk about the inevitable that happens when we go through this life, when we go through this world. There is good, there is bad, there is love, there is fear. And we have to exist in this continuum of contrast, in these spectrums of everything. And the only reason that we are able to embrace love in our lives is because we know the opposite of it. We know fear. And so how do we move through this world choosing love relentlessly and dedicatedly? And when I say love, I don't just mean like the gooey, heart-centered, mushy feeling that you get when you're around someone that you love who makes you feel like you're lit up. I mean love in its most pure, deep form, which is creation, the love of wholeness. I mean worthiness. I mean, all that you are right now in this moment and all that you have always been. I mean, distinctly the purest part of you. That is what I mean when I say love. So choosing love over fear is choosing creation over survival. And as I say this, the wind picks up and the trees start to sway and the leaves start to fall. And I feel this beautiful love, this resonance with the world outside of me and around me. If you're watching the video, you can tell that I am in a little bit of a forest right now. This is about addressing the wound of rejection. This is about addressing this control that we exert onto the world around us, thinking that we are responsible for how other people act, how other people feel, how other people move about this world, and that us changing our behavior to mold, to fit, to adapt to circumstances outside of us that aren't ideal for us, that then those circumstances will change because we have now lined ourselves up to change them. When really, when you change how you feel about the conditions, that's when the conditions change. When you change how you feel about the circumstance, that is when the circumstance changes, not by you molding yourself into it. This is not to say that this is easy. It is really difficult to be around people who might be toxic, who might be negative, and stay in your center, stay loving, to have an open heart through all of that. Trust me, I know. But this is a lesson that we are meant to learn. There is a circumstance perhaps in your life where you feel like you can't be yourself, where you feel like you are stifled, where you feel like your heart is just closed and locked up. And I say this with so much love. That circumstance is not the reason. The reason that you are stifled, blocked, closed is self-inflicted. That is your choice. And the reason why it is really hard for us to hear something like that is because blame is a lot easier for us to enact. Blame is a lot easier than guilt. It is a lot easier for us to feel wronged by someone else than to sustain the feeling of having wronged ourselves. It is a lot easier for us to hold someone else responsible, not forgive them, than hold ourselves responsible and have to go through the process of forgiving ourselves, seeing ourselves, talking to ourselves, and coming out of that. And so it is not natural for us to look in the mirror and say, the reason that I feel this way is not because of the circumstances, not because of the person. It's actually because of me and my choice and how I'm interacting with the circumstance and how I'm interacting with the person. That's not natural. That's not an easy thing to do, but it is a choice that we have. And in that choice is so much freedom. And I also want to say that a lot of the things that we're talking about on this season of Figuring Shit Out are going to not be our natural impulse. These are things that are extremely powerful choices that we make by training ourselves out of the conditions that we've been conditioned into. You have been conditioned to make yourself small in order to make others comfortable. You have been conditioned to appease the people around you, to give them what they want before you even ask yourself what it is that you want, before you even prioritize your own desires, before you even feel worthy enough to have desires of your own. You have been conditioned to shut up, stay still, stay where you are, and listen to what they, whoever they is, the big they or your parents or your family, what they have to say first, because you're not here to ruffle feathers. You're here to fit in, stay quiet, go through life, go through school, graduate, go to college, get the 9-to-5 job, retire at 60, die. Pay your taxes. That conditioning is what we've been sold. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's your heart's calling and that's really like what you want to do and that feels aligned to you and that feels like the best circumstance for you to live your life in. But I know for a lot of us, that isn't something that we want. That's just something that has been told to us that we are supposed to do. And so a lot of figuring shit out is about how to allow ourselves the freedom of doing what it is that we want, identifying what it is that we want, living in our purpose. And a lot of that comes with leaving the way that things are, leaving the circumstances, the conditions, the things that we've known, and being in our own choice. No matter what it is, it's our own choice. And that is freedom. And with that comes a lot of these opportunities to navigate relationships and circumstances in our lives that are our direct mirrors for maybe the things that we don't want. When you say, I want to follow my purpose, I want to live my dream life, I am ready to create more for myself because I know I'm powerful and I know that I can. I am ready to be this now and not wait for it. And I am ready to see myself as worthy of it. You are going to be met with every circumstance and opportunity to make that choice. And making that choice means being met with circumstances and opportunities that will allow you to choose what you've chosen before, to allow you to choose the thing that you know is going to keep you in the familiar, is going to keep you small, is going to keep you in those conditions. And so this episode is really about those choices, that circumstance, and embracing the fact that the world does not have to change for you to feel good. The world does not have to change for you to be who you are meant to be. The people in your life do not have to change their behavior for you to embrace who you are and to take up the space that you are meant to take up. And I know that that is really hard to hear. We want other people to change. We want other people to get on board with us and heal with us and be aligned with us and see the world the way that we see it. But really, it was never our job to show anyone or to take anyone with us where we are going or to make anyone else see. It is our job to be exactly what we are, who we are, to know the truths, to embrace the truths, to stay so rooted and grounded and firm in them that the people who don't see that love is their natural essence begin to look at us a little differently and start to see it because we're shining so brightly. We're not trying to get them to see it. We're not making them see anything. We're not making the circumstance different. The circumstance is changing because we are changing, not because we are trying to make it change. When you change the way that you feel about your conditions, that is when your conditions will change. I want to read something that I jotted down in my journal last night. This is not a profound essay of any sort. This is really just something that, as I was falling asleep, going to bed, thinking about this episode, I started to jot down in my half awake, barely lucid state. I wrote, to stay open through the impulse to close, to stay loving through the urge to clench, to stay vulnerable through the desire to hide. is the biggest act of freedom, the grandest use of our will, to sharpen the point to our pencil, which writes the story of our lives with softness. Softness so palpable that the words are sharp, that the words are poignant, is to commit to our creation and is to walk with God. So let's begin where it all begins, right? In childhood. Now I'm going to quote something that I wrote to open up this conversation about our inner children, how it all starts in the inner child of it all. When we were young, we were all dreamers, bright and untouched. The world was at our fingertips and we dreamt just to dream. Do you remember what it was like to dream, just to dream? That was the opening essay to season 2 of Figuring Shit Out. And I think about it often because it really influences so much of this podcast. Inner child healing influences so much of the work that I do because that's where it all begins. And that's where healing really began for me. And inner child healing is so powerful when we can look back and see ourselves so pure, so young, so bright and untouched, that we realize that that is our truth, that our truth is not what we are made to believe it is, that in what is called naivety by society is actually the purest thing that could exist. When we see that, that is when we start to reclaim our lives, our autonomy, ourselves. So if we look back at ourselves when we were a child, before we knew what judgment was, before we knew what rejection was, before we felt loneliness, before we allowed these feelings to make us hide, we see ourselves bright. We see ourselves beaming. We see ourselves taking up space. We see ourselves expressing our emotions fully and completely. We see ourselves not bending to the will of others or to the desire of others, but stating profoundly, this is what we want. We might even throw a tantrum about it. We might even scream about it. We might even cry about it. And when we're happy, what do we do when we're children? We run around, we dance, we exclaim with glee, we make noises, we let ourselves express. And so much of healing, so much of the work that I do is around going back to that state and re-embracing all of these faculties that we abandoned because the world told us that we needed to shut up and stay silent. Some of those faculties, including the natural self-expression that we all desire for, sounds, noises that exist within us, the somatic expression of moving our bodies, of stomping it out when we're angry, of jumping up and down because we're just excited to be alive or we're excited about what happened, allowing ourselves to feel the full spectrum of emotion, being with ourselves through it. That is so much of this reclamation. And a lot of those techniques and tactics I'm going to talk about on this season. I'll get into it a little bit later on this episode, how to really create these practices for yourself to re-embody and self-express and embrace self-expression. It's going to be a big topic on this season because it really has changed my life and I've watched it change so many people's lives. But the long and the short of this is that when we were young, we were bright and untouched. And then somewhere along the way, we got hurt, we got stung, we learned a few things by the way that we were raised, by the people who we were raised by. And for many of us who are empathic and sensitive and who are connected to their spirituality now, I have a hunch that many of you were children who were adaptive to your parents' responses, who were adaptive to the world around you, who learned how to behave based on the way that you were responded to. Maybe learned a little bit too much how to read the room. You read the room a little too hard to the point where you kind of disappeared in the room and you just became the room, if you know what I mean. You might have developed a hypervigilance, a feeling of what is this person going to respond to me with? how are they going to behave if I do this? You might have learned a fearful response in being yourself because maybe you were rejected at a young age. Maybe you were really excited about something and you got shut down. Maybe someone didn't pay attention to you that was supposed to pay attention to you and you felt abandoned. Maybe you felt betrayed by your family circumstance because of situations that were toxic or abusive or should have never happened to you. And maybe somewhere along the way, you learned that the only safe place that you could be yourself was with yourself. Now, I resonate a lot with this. When I was young, I was a dreamer. I was a doer. I was a writer. I was a singer. I was an artiste. I would perform for my stuffed animals. And then I turned like 6 years old and I started to realize that there was so much chaos and dysfunction happening in my family that I learned that my desires and the dreams I had and the playful things that I wanted to do were not important. Those were secondary. What was primary was making sure that everyone was okay. And I somehow, at like 6 years old, made myself responsible for this. I was a very hyper vigilant child. It's something that I am still undergoing, unraveling, is living without that sense of urgency and living without that sense of understanding at such a deep level how someone is feeling and what they're feeling just by them entering into a room. It is a superpower. It is truly a superpower to be intuitive and connected and empathic. Like, it is something that is so beautiful and will likely contextualize and color a lot of your work if you are like me and you have had those experiences. But there comes a point where it is maladaptive, where you are living your life assessing how other people are going to respond before you even assess or ask yourself what your desires are. So we do this when we're young. We cover ourselves up. We hide behind whatever it is that we hide behind. And we learn that we can't be ourselves, that to be ourselves is to be rejected. And especially if you grew up in a chaotic household or you lived with dysfunction or you have trauma, like literally all of us do, okay? You probably started to adapt yourself based on the circumstances and environments around you to the point of self-abandonment. You were abandoned, you felt abandoned, and so you abandoned yourself. You were rejected, you felt rejected, and so you rejected yourself. And therefore, you learned, perhaps like I learned, that the only time that you could be yourself was with yourself. And this is a long, long history that so many of us have, especially those of us who are on our healing journey, who have uncovered and recovered a sense of ourselves. We have learned how to do that by spending time with ourselves, by discovering ourselves, by realizing the beauty of ourselves when we're with ourselves. But so many of us have a hard time taking that connection with us into the world, staying in that place, because we are still conditioned from childhood to believe that play, that love for ourselves, that connection, that time with ourselves, that is for us to be by ourselves. That's not for us to take with us in the world. We can't possibly take up that much space when we are around other people. We can't possibly shine that bright. But when we're alone, it's safe to do that. A lot of us have learned that it is safe for us to do it by ourselves. And that's how a lot of us have healed. This is what the part 2 to this episode is really going to be about. I have a hunch and a theory that a lot of introversion, a lot of us who call ourselves introverted, are really just socially anxious and really just have a complicated relationship with feelings of rejection. And for me, this is so, so true. I have self-identified as an introvert for so much of my life. And it is only up until recently, like in the last few months, where I've found such depth of community and so many people who are just like me. And I feel so connected to them. And it's because I've learned how to stay in my place of alignment regardless of circumstance. So this is like part 2 to this episode, is finding that community, staying where you are, and realizing that a lot of introversion is just anxiety. It's social anxiety. It's fear of rejection, and embracing the fact that we are social creatures and that we thrive in community and we thrive in environments where we can be seen and held and heard and loved. And this does not mean that you don't or can't fully recharge when you're by yourself. I still need alone time, but I used to need so much more just to function. And it's because I was constantly compensating for this anxiety that I felt in being in the world because I wasn't being myself in the world. I was pretending in the world. I was always putting on this performance in the world of, this is what I think that you want from me. This is what I think I should be. This is what I think that you want to hear. And I really certainly do not want you to think of me as someone who doesn't care or who is a bitch or who is self-absorbed. So let me just literally take my entire self and put it over there so that I can be completely and fully available to everyone here and assess how they might respond and how they might see me and what they might be thinking before they even know that they're thinking it, so that I can make sure that I am not rejected in this scenario. Let me create this perfect version of what I think that the world wants, what I think my family wants, what I think my friends want to see from me, instead of just being myself, because being myself is too dangerous and they don't want myself. Myself is too big. It's too bright. It shines too much. They don't want that. That's dangerous. They will reject me if I do that. So therefore, here's this performance, this half version of me up for grabs. Here you go. So we do that. And then we wonder why we feel unfulfilled by our relationships. We wonder why we feel so depleted. We wonder why we need so much damn time alone to recover. It's because we're not being ourselves in the world. It's because we have this constant sense of anxiety and urgency following us around that tells us that we need to perform and that we need to shape ourselves to the circumstances and environments around us, rather than just allowing the way that we are to influence it. I have an entire episode about this, but this concept of you do not have to adapt to the energy in the room. You can influence it. You are that powerful. But we choose, because we're conditioned to sit in the back seat of our own power and not step into the fullness of who we are, because we are afraid that the fullness of who we are is going to be too much, that it's going to be too loud, that it's going to be too opinionated, that we're not going to resonate with others, connect with others. A lot of this, as I said in the beginning, has to do with, one, our fear of rejection, and two, our ability to see ourselves as worthy of taking up that space, and in accepting ourselves, knowing that it truly doesn't really matter if other people accept us, but that in accepting ourselves, in being ourselves, in fully being there, that we will attract people who will see us. We will attract the people who are meant for us. We will attract the circumstances and opportunities and situations that are fully and completely aligned with the truth of who we are when we are being who we are. Okay, that is the second part of this episode, and I'm really going to get deeply, deeply into that. But I wanted to touch on this very softly here, that a lot of introversion and a lot of hiding ourselves comes from this place of fearing rejection in childhood. And a lot of healing it comes from realizing that if we can be ourselves when we are alone, and if we can find the truth of who we are in these circumstances, in these pockets, we have half of this done. Like, if you are here, if you are listening to Figuring Shit Out, I know that you have a connection to yourself. I know that you are grounded in something larger than yourself as well. I know that you feel a connection to your own creativity, your own purpose, your own power, or at least you feel tiny little remnants to it that allow you to know that that deserves to expand. If you're listening to this podcast, I know that you have gone through things in your life that have caused you to ask for more, that have caused you to want more for yourself, that have caused you to see those challenges as opportunities and as lessons to grow. And so I know that you've already probably done some shadow work. And if you haven't, I have a couple of episodes where you can start. And I know that you have felt connected to yourself at some point. Maybe it's a deep connection. Maybe it's a surface level connection that you're just starting to develop. How do you take that with you into the world? If you're learning about yourself, developing a relationship with yourself, starting to see yourself as valid and worthy of existing and taking up that space, and you are learning how to be embodied by yourself, great. That's the first step. But now how do you go into the world and allow that to be where you are and not allow all the circumstances that are inevitable, that are gonna come crashing in, to make you feel quivered in that place? How do you sustain that when you're not in those perfectly ideal circumstances and environments? If you think about your perfect ideal circumstance right now, you're relaxed, you're connected. Where are you? For me, it's literally right here. Like, the sun is shining, the leaves are turning, I'm in this beautiful red coat, I'm recording a podcast episode, episode 103, I have recorded and edited and produced and created and written for 103 podcast episodes of my own. That's amazing. It's crazy. I'm sitting here and it's fall and the air is fresh and the sky is blue. This is like an ideal circumstance. Like, this is peak circumstance. But guess what? I could be in this circumstance right now, looking around and saying, it's a little cold right here. And I'm really not feeling so good about the way that this podcast episode's coming out. There are things that could be better. And, I'm really hungry and I kind of want to eat, but I don't want to go inside to eat because I don't want to interrupt my flow. And all of these things that are actually kind of real for me right now. Like, I am kind of hungry and I don't love how the flow is coming out. All of these things that I could focus on theoretically that would take me out of this perfect and ideal circumstance. There are arguments to be made for this being the perfect and ideal circumstance. And there are arguments to be made for this being actually not that great of a circumstance. I am choosing to connect to and feel the perfection and the ideal of this circumstance because honestly, it's pretty fucking good. And so if that is the case, then isn't every perfect and ideal circumstance in your life where you feel most aligned, most connected? Maybe it's when you're at the gym. Maybe it's when you're connecting to yourself. Maybe it's when you are journaling or dancing or creating art or writing or being with your friends or being out and about and loving and laughing and living life. Whatever it is where you feel aligned, you could make an argument that the only reason that you feel aligned is because you feel aligned. Stay with me here. The only reason that you feel aligned in those circumstances is because you are choosing to be open to the alignment of them. The only reason that you're able to, when you travel, gain a new perspective that you didn't have before is because you are open to it, is because your mind is open to it, your heart is open to it, your senses are refreshed. And the travel itself doesn't actually give you anything. It just allows you to open up the space. I realized this so profoundly when I went to Bali, because I realized that nothing that exists on the actual other side of the world, like 24-hour plane ride to get to the other side of the world, to go 12 hours ahead in time zones, nothing exists over there that does not exist here. It's all a matter of the way in which I see it. And I had to go have that experience to really realize that it wasn't the experience that I was after, it was the perspective. And coming back to New York City after that experience, being in Bali for 2 months, traveling the world, I realized that the integration period, which took place for a very long time, where I had to basically take that perspective and now apply it to my current circumstance, that was the most important part of it. It wasn't becoming a certified yoga teacher or making friends or actually starting to pursue this podcast full time. It was the perspective of being open to a new way of life that I didn't feel like I could be in this circumstance. But really, I had to just come back to this circumstance with that perspective to change it at all. The circumstance changed when my feelings about the circumstance changed, not because the circumstance changed or because I changed the circumstance. It was because I changed. Something in me changed, or something in me opened or awakened that allowed me to see the circumstance differently. So my point here is that in any moment that you feel connected, any moment you feel aligned, any moment that you have your ideal circumstance or situation, the only reason why it is your ideal circumstance or situation is because you see it that way. You are the one igniting it, allowing it to shine its good graces onto you. I can look around at all these trees and get so happy and get so giddy, but someone who is not connected to feeling happy or giddy, or who has not practiced feeling happy or giddy, can sit out here in a bad mood and look at these trees and feel absolutely nothing. It has nothing to do with the circumstance. It is all about your feelings about the circumstance. And there are so many opportunities to focus on what you do want, when there are so many opportunities to experience joy and love and gratitude attitude in your life, why, oh, why would you choose to experience the latter, the opposite? Why, oh, why would you choose to sit around and think about everything that's bad, everything that sucks, everything that could be better? Well, I'll answer that question for you. It's because you've been conditioned to. It's because that's your thought pattern. It's because that's simply the way that you've trained yourself to think. I said this in episode 100. If you want to think differently, if you want to have a different perspective, you have to think differently. You have to think something else. You have to think again. You have to have a different perspective. It really is that simple. It really is that easy. And it starts with, honestly, kind of pretending. Like you find the smallest of possibility in a situation that feels impossible. And that is your entry point. That is your opening. And you focus everything you have on that. Even if there's so much resistance and there's so much discomfort, you focus on that. So when you realize that in all of the moments where you feel aligned, that is because you feel aligned, then you also have to take responsibility for all of the moments where you don't feel aligned, knowing that the reason that you don't feel aligned is not because of the circumstances, not because of the negative people. It's not because of the judgments or rejections or the potentials of whatever it is that you fear. It's because you don't feel aligned. It's because your perspective is that I can only be this way. I can only feel this way if. And that's where the mindset needs to shift. We shift into taking the full responsibility of our alignment. The world does not have to change so that you feel good, and it won't, and it doesn't. And if you're going to wait for it to, you're going to be waiting for a long time. So let's take the example of someone who is really negative, someone who we maybe have to be around, someone who we don't have a choice to end a relationship with and move on. And there are going to be people like that. I personally do not believe in cutting ties with family unless it is a really abusive and toxic situation that keeps hurting you over and over and over again. There are circumstances in our lives where we can't or don't want to end relationships with people, even if they are difficult to be around, even if they can be toxic, even if they're challenging. I know a couple of years ago, the whole protecting your peace thing was a really big movement in cutting people off if they did not contribute to your peace and being ruthless about how you interacted with people and shutting people down if they said anything negative to you. And truthfully, that's just really not how the world works. Like, you are going to be around people who do not see the world the way that you do, especially if you are the 1% of people who decides to focus on your betterment, who decides to focus on improving yourself, who is connected to your humanity and your spirituality, who is doing this work of expansion. You are the 1%. Not everyone's doing this. Not a lot of people care to do this. Not a lot of people want to go back into childhood and figure out what hurt them so that they can heal it. A lot of people just want to throw their hands up and avoid and blame. Okay. And that is their path, and maybe they'll come to it at some point, and maybe they won't, and maybe that's not for them in this incarnation. And whatever it is, the point is that you can't expect people to be honoring your boundaries or protecting your peace. Your staying exactly where you are has nothing to do with whether or not people allow you to do it. It's an unapologetic, unconditional beingness. That is really, at the end of the day, what this is about, and what this episode is about is unconditional, unapologetic beingness of who you are no matter what. And in that, you protect your peace. You don't have to cut people off or shade people or put your hand up and say, I'm not talking to you, I'm not engaging, to protect your peace. You don't engage by simply not energetically engaging. So let's take the example of someone who is really negative in your life, who complains a lot, who might project their own feelings and emotions at you or towards you in a way that doesn't feel fair or makes you feel rejected or resentful or whatever it is. Now, you might want them to be different. You might even have expectations for them to be different, especially if this is a parent. You might sit there and be like, this is my mother or my father, and therefore they should be this way, and they're not. And because of that, I don't feel good. And because of that, I hurt and I'm sad. And your feelings of pain are very valid and very real, and also very alive in that inner child within you. But something I have learned really profoundly, especially with relationships and situations where you know that the person is probably not going to change, where you know that a conversation or communication with them is probably not going to do anything, where you've had enough circumstances and interactions with them to know their history and to know who they are, that in those situations, it is your responsibility. fully, to meet them where they are if you want a relationship with them and say, okay, this is what you can give me. This is what you are able to provide for me. Maybe they're really negative and they complain a lot, but they still give you really good hugs. Maybe they project their insecurities at you, but you share a good laugh with them sometimes. And I'm not saying you have to continue relationships with all of these people, but a lot of times the circumstances in our lives that feel like we can't change them are relationships with people that we did not choose to have relationships with, okay? We can't choose our family. Our family just is there. How do we continue to stay in love relentlessly, unapologetically be ourselves, even around circumstances and situations where people are motivated by fear, where people are motivated by their own fears of rejection? How? So that's what we're talking about. So in those circumstances, you know their history. You have all of the information to know how they've behaved in the past, how they probably will behave in the future, and how they are right now. You know that. So tell me why you are consistently surprised, you are consistently confused, you are consistently trying to change the way that they are. If you know how they are, why are you trying to fight the way that they are? Is it painful? Does it hurt? Do you wish that they were different? Yeah, probably. There's space for that. There's feeling time for that. But in the reality of staying in your alignment, accepting people for who they are is the way that you accept. What we're actually saying is you need to be a certain way for me to feel a certain way. This is a flawed premise. This is a premise of you did this, therefore I feel this, and you're responsible for it. And this is a trap that keeps us trying to control our conditions and control the people around us. Why are you trying to exert control on another human being? Another human being who has full faculty over their entire life, over their entire consciousness, over their own ability, and honestly, who will not change unless they want to change. It is not your job to make them see you, to make them see your perspective, to make them understand anything, to make anything happen. That is not your job. It never has been. Your job is to commit fully to what you want and to what you believe. Jesus did this. All of the great religious spiritual leaders did this. They did not care that they were crucified or persecuted for it. They believed so radically, so completely in what they believed. They were willing to die for what they believed because they knew it so deeply within them that it did not matter what it caused in other people, what it provoked in other people. It did not matter the direct contrast of the people who did not believe or the people who did not feel into the divine love and oneness that so many of these religious and spiritual leaders have felt, that they have touted about in the world and then they've been crucified for. It didn't matter. They committed so much more to what they believed, and they loved anyways. They loved the people who did not love them anyways. They accepted radically the conditions that came from being exactly where they were. And now I'm not saying that you have to go to that complete and radical extreme. But what I am saying is that it is not your job to make anyone believe anything at all. The reason that Jesus had followers is not because he was out here shaking people by the shoulders saying, don't you see? Don't you see? No. He was just completely, fully in his oneness, believing in it, speaking the word of the good God, going around talking about God, and then people started to follow him because they saw that he was just so in his beingness. And now this is not becoming a pipeline to religious podcasting. I'm just using that as an example because we got a lot to learn from a lot of these religious leaders, particularly Jesus being one of them, modeled amazing patience and wisdom. And I do believe in God. You can call it whatever you want. I call it God. And I don't believe that it's some man in the sky, but I do believe that it is an incredible divine oneness that Jesus was connected to. And so many of the other religious leaders that talked about this beautiful divine oneness, these beautiful relationships that we see in all of these different religious texts that are actually so uniform and consistent in a lot of ways that draw back to the fact that love is really all there is. Very simplified version of it. That's all I'm saying. I digress. The point is, you can't depend on someone else to get your perspective, to have your perspective. And if you do, then maybe you don't actually believe enough in your own perspective. You validating yourself, accepting yourself, seeing things fully in your own eyes, feeling them fully in your own body is all the evidence that you need. You do not need someone else to sit there and say, you know what, you're right. Or you know what, I do see your point. It is actually so freeing to realize that everyone is in their own dream. Everyone is in their own reality. And because everyone is in their own dream and their own reality, you get to choose your own. You get to witness and see that maybe someone else's dream is filled with fear and sadness and rejection and guilt and blame and victimhood. And that is their truth. That is very real to them. Who are you to look at them and say, that's not how life is? That's not what real truth is. That is their truth. You are not responsible for changing their truth, no matter how much you love them. You are responsible for claiming your own, for being in your own sense of devotion to love, to joy, to divine oneness, to connection, to purpose, to power, to alignment. And from that place, only from that place of commitment and wholeness will you ever have even the slightest bit of chance of changing someone else's mind. Not by trying to change it, but by being so fully rooted into who you are, what you believe, your fullness, that naturally the effect is of attraction. If we talk about love, the truth is, if you love someone, you have to take them off of the pedestal that says that they have to be a certain way for your relationship with them to thrive. If you love someone, you have to take them off of the pedestal of perfection, of not making mistakes, of expectation. If you love someone, you love them, period. If you love someone, it does not depend on their behavior if you love them or not. This doesn't mean, like I said before, that you have to engage with them. I also want to differentiate engagement from interaction, because interaction is being able to talk to someone, have a conversation with them, but not take on what they're carrying. You can hear their perspective, see their point, and say, okay, that's yours. Engagement, engaging with them is different. Engaging with them is then allowing your perspective to be muddled by their perspective. It is then allowing their beingness to impact your beingness. And that's where so many of us empathic and sensitive people go wrong, is because we've learned to change our behavior to the world and the people around us, instead of just being exactly where we are, who we are, shining brightly. And because of that, we hear someone else come into a room, or we see a circumstance in front of us, and we take on the energy of this circumstance in order to try to keep the peace, in order to try to keep it be a certain way so that maybe we can preserve our own alignment. But even in the desire to preserve your own alignment, you've already become unaligned, because you've already assumed that your circumstance and your situation and the person that you're interacting with or engaging with is going to take you from it. And you have to know, embrace, and really commit to this. You are the only one who can take yourself from it. And so if you've fallen off, if you've had a bad day, it happens, shit happens, things happen. But know and take the responsibility for the fact that you are the one who shifted that perspective, that somewhere along the way, something got in, you let it in, you allowed it in, and now it's time to recenter, refocus, come back. It is not about how many times the circumstances in our lives affect us or make us feel a certain way. They're going to. That's natural. It's not like you're going to be completely unperturbed by these people or by these circumstances. It's about allowing yourself to bounce back quickly, bounce back so fast that you don't even notice the difference between unalignment and alignment, because you are already back before you've even begun to let something else in. It's about getting so good and so quick at realizing how you're feeling in this moment, what is bringing you vitality and what is depleting you, and focusing your energy on that vitality. Again, this all goes back to confronting our fear of rejection, because I think that, a lot of us logically know these things, but at the end of the day, when we're around people who are not beaming and not shining and who are afraid to, it's scary for us to beam and shine and be ourselves, because we're worried that they are going to reject us. And maybe they will. Maybe they will. Maybe you will lose a few people in your life. Maybe you will have to step out of conditions that are unaligned for you because you simply can't see them differently. But maybe that was never your path, and maybe those were never your people. When you are committed to something larger than what you fear, when you're committed to your alignment, your connection, because you know that the world is better when you are, that your life is better when you are, that hating yourself, hating others, fearing rejection, rejecting others, that gets you nowhere besides fear and rejection and more of what you do not want. When you know that, and when you are committed to being connected to you, to the beingness, to the truth of who you are, to your inevitability. And you see these circumstances, these situations as points of contrast for you to sharpen your ability to focus. Maybe you're in a job you don't like. I've been there. Whatever it is, if there's something that's providing you with the contrast of, I don't want this, I don't want this, what it is doing is showing you what it is that you do want. It is allowing you the opportunity, the mirror, to focus on what it is that you do want. As I said before, the only reason that your ideal circumstance or situation is ideal for you is because you are so focused on the idealisms that make it ideal. So if you are in a completely unideal situation, what about it will drive you to understanding what your ideal is? And so a lot of this is the subtle nuances of how you feel. It's noticing how you feel. It's noticing, oh, I was just really connected to myself and feeling aligned and feeling good. And then I walked into this room and something in me shrunk. My shoulders caved in. I'm hiding. I'm crossing my arms. All of these things that are actually so unconscious that we don't even realize are unconscious. When we experience ourselves shrinking, we can look at it and say, oh, okay, there's part of me that thinks I'm not safe here. There's part of me that thinks it's not safe to be who I am. How can I show myself that it is? How can I be there for myself? And sometimes it's going to prioritize that alone time if the alone time is where you know how to be aligned and connected. And then staying. I really try to prioritize on a daily basis this mind, body, and spirit full experience. So for my mind, every day, it's just not letting anything in until I've been let into my own world. For my body, it is expressing myself through movement and somatics and shaking. This is something that I talk about a lot and I teach you how to do in my Road Less Traveled program, which is going to be live very, very soon again. And it's going to be a lot more accessible and you're going to get access to a whole new community through it. I'm very excited about it. I'll talk about it a little bit more in a few more episodes when it's ready, but make sure you're subscribed to the mailing list because it will give you all of the details about it when that is live. But I go through somatics and connecting to my voice, connecting to my body, connecting to my breath, changing my neurochemistry with breath. This is something that I've learned while becoming a breathwork practitioner. Something that I am doing now in New York City is guiding breathwork and meditation classes specifically around opening the heart. And then spirit. So literally talking out loud to God, talking to the trees, talking to something larger than me, connecting, using my faculties of written words and spoken words, and really just creating this full 360 experience where I am now tapped in and connected to myself. I can feel something in my body, and not only can I feel it, but I have now expressed myself fully and completely. So I'll shake around, I'll dance about. If my feelings that day are kind of stagnant and stuck and suppressed, I literally throw a tantrum in my body. Like I will express myself so fully to get it out. I will vocally resonate and make sounds like ha and ha and ha. And it sounds a little crazy, but it's really not. It's really just coming back to all of the things that we did when we were children to fully express ourselves and get all that energy out of our body and coming back into ourselves. A lot of this has to do with feeling. A lot of this has to do with access to our ability to feel. And that comes with the prioritization of feeling, a commitment to it, of feeling all of the spectrum of emotions and then choosing which ones you want to go into the day with. I'm here to tell you that you have a choice. You have a choice in what you want, and you have a choice to choose what it is that you want. And perhaps what you want in the past has been colored by conditions and what other people have wanted, what the people who have raised you have wanted, what they've wanted for you, and what you think you should want for yourself. And maybe you don't know exactly what it is that you want, but maybe you know that you want to feel good. That's pretty easy. It's a pretty easy desire for many of us. So start there. Start there and see where in your life you feel good, where you receive and feel vitality and what that feels like in you. And at a visceral, physical level, how it feels. And when you begin to access that, you will begin to see the direct contrast of what depletes you. And it will be much easier for you to make those choices, even if you have to make some sacrifices of being liked sometimes. Would you rather be grounded and connected to your purpose and to who you are, live this life fully and completely, be exactly all that you are meant to be, or be liked and be small and hide? The unapologetic beingness of you is your responsibility. It's your job. And this conversation does not end here. We will continue this next week, and we'll talk about community and attracting like-minded people and how to really embody this further in the world. But for now, this is what I have. Make sure that you guys are signed up for the mailing list. Make sure you get your merch. There are really cute hats and sweatshirts, perfect for fall, available on the Figuring Shit Out website. If you're interested in the Road Less Traveled program, please DM me on Instagram. Let me know you're interested. Sign up for the mailing list. If you sign up for the mailing list, you can also get 10% off your first order of merch. And you will also have the opportunity to write to me in any requests you have for the podcast. Maybe something's going on in your life. Maybe you want direct advice. I'm going to be answering a few of these over the next couple of episodes and also using them to color some of Figuring Shit Out's new topics. So feel free to do that. It will be in your mailing list when you sign up, that invitation there to write to me. Make sure you rate the podcast on your preferred streaming platform. Comment on this episode. Let me know how you liked it. It really helps. Share it with a friend. Share it with an enemy. And remember, if you spend your whole life trying to get your act together, you don't have a life, you have an act. So go and live your fucking life. Oh, and by the way, I'm hosting a retreat in Costa Rica, and there is one 10% off spot left. So if you're interested in it, get your 10% off spot. It's in March. All the details are linked below. Thank you so much for listening. I love you, and I'll see you next week.
You got to look for the redeeming feature. You got to look for things to appreciate. You got to find a reason to make it okay where you are. No, I've got to strive and struggle and try. That's what I've been taught. Growth and expansion is my quest. No, that's inevitable. Whether it comes easy or hard is the question.
The horrible truth is that it's an inside job. That if you're going to get that love and that respect that you've just that union starts inside.
To every experience of growth, there is an equal and an opposite. And that equal and an opposite is what drives you to that light. So you have to start inwards. You have to start first within yourself.